Now let's get back to talking with Clay Doyle, who is the Vice President for Transmission and Distribution at El Paso Electric. Remind me where we were.
We're talking basically about how the grid is connected, and I guess to sum up that, in the grid system, we are electrically tied to every utility west of us, all the way to California and British Columbia. So it is possible that we're tied with Bonneville Power, which is in Portland,
way up there.
Way up there in the northwest, right?
That's a hydropower plant.
It's a hydropower plant, and we could, in theory, we could make a purchase agreement to bring energy in from Bonneville Power. Of course, there's a lot of different utilities between us and them, and there's a lot of transmission lines, and we have to pay for all the transmission to get it here, and so it might be cost prohibitive. But the theory is that we're all interconnected,
right,
and so a load shift in one area is a load shift for us too. So,
well, one thing that El Paso Electric has taken a lot of flack about is the capital equipment that you're putting up, and you might say, why is that necessary? Is the demand growing? Are there special items? I was thinking of covering the intermittency of renewables like solar and wind. So how do you balance all that out?
All right, so we have a regulatory and corporate requirement to keep to maintain levels of reliability. That means contingency planning as well. So we have to plan our infrastructure, whether it's a substation or whether it's generation or the distribution lines or transmission lines. We have to plan kind of in advance based on what load growth is in different areas. So we plan and we make these investments, and they're usually 30, 40-year investments, and we have to maintain levels of reliability.
Right. The average life of a generator is about 40 years, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, so you got to amortize that.
Right, over many, many years, right?
And most corporations have, a 5-year planning horizon, and you've got a 40-year plan.
Yeah, for generation and for our substations, and for our infrastructure equipment, it's a 40-year lifespan. Our planning horizon is about 10 years, but a lifespan of these things are typically 40 years. We have some substation transformers, some substation equipment that's approaching 70 years old.
What?
It's still in service and still running, and a lot of these old transformers that were in substations that we built way before my time and your time are still functioning.
Wow, that's incredible. So I know one thing that people ask you is, why not more solar power? Now, how much you have so much installed capacity, and given the duty cycle or whatever you want to call it, what average megawatt hours of production per year do you get out of the solar?
I can't speak to the megawatt hours. I can only speak to capacity. I'd have to get that number, but right now we have about the company utility scale, which is
right,
the large megawatt solar sites. We have one here at the West Mesa Industrial Park.
Mm-hmm.
We have, and that's a 10 megawatt plant, and we have a 20 megawatt plant down in Sunland Park, Santa Teresa area, and another 10 or 12, I'm not sure, in Chaparral. And then we have 5 megawatts of solar at near Hatch, and then I think we have another 40 or 50 megawatts at Macho Springs, which is between Deming and Hatch. In that Macho Springs area, there's near Nutt.
So it's on the order of maybe 100 megawatts?
Yeah, we've got about 100. I think it's 100. Last count was 104 or 110 megawatts total by the time you add in the all the residential, which is the distribution tied generation.
Right.
It's about 104 to 110 megawatts total, and so that's been a good investment for us. We've enjoyed that, and it's the right thing to do. If it's available, we'll use it. We're perfectly situated in south central New Mexico and far west Texas for solar energy.
Right. Now that's a completely different economic model in a sense, because if you've got a natural gas-fired plant, you're paying for the fuel all the time, and you've got a certain fraction of your total cost as capital cost. And I just remembered some figure like 25% of the life cycle cost is the plant, and the rest is fuel and everything else. But it's sort of the inverse.
Yeah, it's the inverse for solar.
So you've got to, when you make a big investment like that, you've got to say, I'm guessing what the market is and the technology 10 years from now.
Correct.
So who's in charge of making those big estimates?
Okay, so we do an annual loads and resource study, and we're looking at what we project our load to be, 5 years, 10 years into the future, and then we have to plan on how we're going to meet that, what we call demand, electrical demand. And then we look at our fleet, and we have to consider the age of our fleet and the cost of some of this. We've got some generators that are very old that it's about time to retire those, and we're looking at doing that. And then we have to, we go through an IRP process here in New Mexico, which is the Integrated Resource Plan, and we discuss how we might meet that future load, and then we set about procuring that energy, whether it's solar or whether it's natural gas or wind or some other source.
I like your use of the term fleet because it makes it sound like airplanes, but your LM100s are like vertical jet engines, right?
Yeah, the LMS 100s are General Electric. Basically, it's a modified. I like to call it a modified airplane or jet engine, and it's very fast starting. I think we can get from cold load nothing, from startup to full capacity in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And it's got a very attractive heat rate. So, and the heat rate is how much energy do you have to put in to get a megawatt out. That's what now they term it.
Right.
So
is that like what we'd call first law efficiency? I think I remember some figure like 38% electric power out for per unit of thermal power in.
Yeah, I'll have to take you on that.
Oh, okay. But you get a higher efficiency on the units with, what do you call them, recuperators, regenerators?
Yeah, if we got a combined cycle unit, you've got, the combined cycle units, they use the heat that is generated for the, to turn a gas turbine, and then it's reheated and used to run usually it's a steam generator first, and then it goes into a turbine after that. So you use the heat 2 or 3 times before you exhaust it. And so combined cycle units are tremendously efficient, are the most efficient of all.
But they take a long time to
Yeah, their startup is not. It takes. You're not going to get to full load in 10 minutes on one of these big generators.
Hours. Right?
Yeah, I want to put the disclaimer in here. I'm not an expert on generation. Okay, we have other individuals in the company that are really versed on this and understand it. But
yeah, I was thinking, let's jump back to an interesting part of the whole history, and I would put this back to Michael Faraday in England, because he was the one who discovered magnetic induction. You move a wire in a magnetic field and you get a voltage and a current, and the vice versa. You put a current through a wire and you get a magnetic field, and you put this together. By the way, he was essentially self-taught. This was incredible.
Yeah.
And he even became, I guess, the president of the Royal Society, or maybe he turned that down. One of the interesting things was he was asked to work on chemical warfare in World War I. He said no.
Really?
Yeah. But he was an interesting guy. He didn't have a whole lot of math background, although he did quite a bit. And the person who put it together for, you might say, electromagnetic theory was James Clerk Maxwell. And
Maxwell's equations.
Yeah, I have a T-shirt with Maxwell's equations. He wrote down 20 equations, and I forget who condensed it down to 4. Maxwell wrote these down, and he said, hey, wait a minute. There's a traveling wave solution of this. That's light. And he predicted the speed of light accurately.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was the beginning of radio. That was the beginning of AC power and everything else. But then you jump in and you've got Nikola Tesla. And I think he was Serbian.
I think that's right. And he immigrated. No, he's Italian, wasn't he? And immigrated here? Okay.
Well, I don't know. But he got tied in with, was it George Westinghouse? Is that Westinghouse's name? And they had a big fight with Thomas Edison, who wanted to do direct current transmission.
Correct.
There's a lot of trouble with direct current transmission because you can't push it very far.
Correct.
Not at low voltage, and that's all that was available. How do you boost it in voltage? You don't.
No.
But you can do that with AC power.
Right. That's the magic of the transformer that that Nikola Tesla, demonstrated and performed and again eventually patented.
Yeah, and the induction motor, right.
Right, and the induction motor, right.
Right. And I remember there was just a bitter fight, and Edison was trying to say AC is dangerous.
Right.
And he electrocuted an elephant that had been a problem. And he faked a lot of this stuff.
Right.
But, of course, DC power is just as dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
There's a really interesting story in this book, Something Time, by Art Winfrey. There was a guy who was looking at the timing of the heart.
Mm-hmm.
And he realized there's a special sort of a geometrical interpretation of what's going on. And if you interrupt the cycle in the heart at a certain time, it has an indefinite phase and it won't restart.
Oh, really?
He found this out with a frog heart. And otherwise, you can just reset the phase.
Uh-huh.
So he said, we should try this in humans, but I'm not going to ask anybody else to do this. I'm going to do it on myself. So I said, here's what I gave as the voltage to the frog.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to scale it up to humans, but then go down, I think it was by a factor of 4 to be safe. Unfortunately, frogs and humans' hearts are different. He scaled it right into the region of phase and voltage that stopped his heart, and he was found dead at his lab the next morning.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, yeah, you can get hurt by AC. You can be hurt by all sorts of things.
Right.
You get hurt by DC. I still remember I used to do tube radios, and one of them required a 90-volt battery. That gives you a real jolt when you put your fingers across it.
Yeah.
You don't see those anymore.
No.
So you got all these people who, going way back, contributed to what we have now.
Mm-hmm.
And let's say, how reliable is it? What services does it provide? You can compare it to places that don't have this reliably. Lots of third world countries, power is very much interruptible or not even available for more than several hours a day.
Right.
And then we've got it constant in time, and it's controlled in frequency and all that stuff. So we keep this going. We take it for granted. And what keeps it stable overall? Okay, we've got all these people working with you and every other utility. We've got regulators to say this really would help. You get legislators who often get in the way. And I think one of the problems with planning how much you would invest in renewables is it changes every year or 2 years, right? And I remember a guy from P&M at a conference saying the big barrier to getting renewables on is we don't know what the rules and the financial breaks are going to be so that we can invest in this.
Yeah.
If we just settled that and just got out of the way, it would be very helpful.
Correct.
So what are the big, you might say, large-scale, let's start with the small-scale threats.
Okay.
What happens here that causes problems for the grid, for your electric power going to your house or your business?
Okay, so the main thing is just interruptions on the line. Something gets into the distribution line that connects you with the substation, and on the distribution line, we have probably on the order of 2,500 different outage events a year, ranging from maybe just one customer to the other night we had a big outage here in Las Cruces, had about 6,000 customers out of service, almost 2 hours. And that was caused by, apparently, as far as we know right now, someone threw some wire up into our lines.
Really?
Yeah. So we're investigating it still as a vandalism.
Oh, that's incredible vandalism.
Yeah. And but we have a number of outages every year, and we have the equipment is designed to disconnect or open and then try to reclose, because about 75% of outages happen or a tree limb getting into the line, a bird on a line or something, and magically they kind of clear themselves because there's a lot of energy there, and you have a big short, and things usually burn up and fall out. And if you give the line a chance to reclose and reconnect, that's why sometimes our customers will see a blink of the lights.
Right.
That's an outage event that happened that cleared itself, and the line stayed hot. But sometimes the cause of the fault remains, and it becomes what we call sustained outage, which is 5 minutes or more.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's one of the challenges we have. And then that's kind of on the distribution side of things. So just for your listeners, when you think in terms of electric power systems, utility systems, there are really three major segments. There's the generation segment, and then there's the transmission segment, and then there's the distribution segment. And the connecting between generation and transmission and distribution are the substations, where we have large power transformers that either raise or lower the voltage. And so things can happen at the transmission level. The major difference at the transmission level is that the transmission lines are so interconnected. There are most every substation we have has at least two transmission lines connecting it. So if you lose one transmission line, you don't lose power to the substation, and you still have power at your home because of that interconnection, or that complexity is called networked. But there are occasions when we could be down to one transmission line, one of our interconnecting lines. If we lose that, we could be in a situation where we could potentially have less generation than we have load, and we could get in a situation where we'd have to drop load. That's why we always have to carry a contingency amount. So there are a number of things. It's rarely a single generator failure that would cause outages or impact reliability. Reliability, for the most part, is dictated at the distribution level, where lines are radial from the substation out to your house, and there's no loop there. And so you have one direction of energy flow from the substation over the line to your house. So if anything gets in that line, it's lights out for you. On the transmission system, it's networked, it's looped, and so if you have a transmission outage, it rarely means an outage at the distribution level where we're connected. So there's a number of things that kind of dictate what level of reliability is.
Yeah.
And
Great. Before we get into the bigger story, or you may like grid scale problems of sustainability, reliability, I'm going to take a break here in just a minute and I'll tell you that we are on KTAL LP, Las Cruces, New Mexico, a community radio station. It's 101.5 on the dial, and of course, most of you would know that because you've gotten on the radio. But we're also streamed live at lccommunityradio.org or radioktal.org. That's QUETAL. We are a community radio, as I say. We're listener supported.